Good morning, Mark. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm great, Arrow. Thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Hard out of 39.
Define what geek is, because my wife and I have looked at this list. We both lived 1982. What made it a geek year?
Well, I think the ubiquity of great and groundbreaking genre films. Okay. So whether it's science fiction, where you have E.T. and Blade Runner and Star Trek II and The Road Warrior and Tron, or in fantasy, Conan the Barbarian, The Beastmaster, Dark Crystal, and horror, of course, it was also a banner year with John Carpenter's The Thing and Poltergeist and Creepshow. So even, you can consider comedies in that, whether it be Tootsie or 48 Hours or Night Shift, and the list goes on and on. It's really an extraordinary year when we say, geek films, quote unquote. So it was you start to see the influence of the success of Star Wars in '77, where science fiction was something the studios took seriously. They were throwing real money at, but they didn't know what would work. So it's very interesting to sort of see. You have the huge success of something like E.T., and then a film like Blade Runner, which comes out and dies at the box office, but then in retrospect is considered one of the great movies of all time. So it's a fascinating year, and I think that's what we really learned in the process of doing the show.
That was also the year that I got my first beta player. And all of a sudden I could have these movies at home. It was like, okay, hurry up and get them out of the theater. Let me buy that movie. I don't care how much I have to pay. I just want to build a library.
Well, I'm so glad you said that, because I think the emergence of home theater is such a crucial part of this year, because even though VHS and beta existed before '82, this is the year that the studios started putting out things at what they called popular prices. I don't know if they really were that great, but Star Trek II and Officer and Gentleman came out at the end of the year on VHS and beta for $39.95. And this was groundbreaking, because until then, the only way you could see something was to rent it at a video store, and they were paying over $100 each. Now you could own movies at home and create a video library. And I think this is the reason why suddenly these films loom so large, because people weren't just going to the theater and seeing a movie once, twice, maybe seeing it again on TV. They would watch films over and over and over and could start quoting the dialogue, and they knew these movies back and forth. And it was the same thing, because you see the emergence of HBO, and suddenly people are watching stuff on HBO over and over again. I mean, like, the great thing about The Beastmaster that came out that year is people started calling HBO. They said, you know what that stands for? Hey, Beastmaster's on. Long before The Sopranos, it was, Beastmaster was on every 12 seconds, because they only showed R-rated movies at night. So the PG movies they would show over and over and over again. And you couldn't turn it on without seeing like the Beastmaster and a lot of these movies.
That is so funny that you bring that up, because 1982, I stopped going to the drive-in, because why do I want to go to a drive-in to see an R-rated movie when I can just go to HBO?
Right, exactly. And so you got HBO. I mean, it's such a turning point in terms of popular culture. You have home video really exploding. You have more HBO in more homes than it ever had been in. And then you also have, because in '81 a little thing called MTV premiered, and you see the emergence of the music video. But '82 is when it really becomes huge, and I think NBC started Friday night videos for people who didn't have cable.
Oh my God!
And so all of a sudden, a hit song could open a movie. So you have Officer and Gentleman, which is huge, based on the back of the Joe Cocker, Jennifer Warren song, Up There Where We Belong. And then, of course, Rocky III had Survivor's Eye of the Tiger. And like, you couldn't go anywhere in '82 without hearing Eye of the Tiger wherever you went. You would walk out of the grocery store, turn on the radio, and all of a sudden Eye of the Tiger would be on again. You get home and turn on and it would be Eye of the Tiger. You couldn't escape it.
Yeah. I'll tell you the song that gets me, and I the movie Night Shift is a great movie, but the Commodore singing Night Shift is the reason why I love that movie, because I was so in love. That Marvin, da-da-da-da-da. I mean, I love that song.
That is a great point. The song in Night Shift, and it's funny because a lot of people don't remember Night Shift, and yet for Ron Howard and Henry Winkler, who are featured in the docuseries, it was such an important movie for them. It was Ron Howard's big, sort of studio breakthrough. He directed some movies, some TV movies, but this was a big thing for him. And then Henry Winkler, it was the first time he worked with Ron Howard outside of Happy Days. And they were so excited to talk about it. It was so funny because when we were sitting with Henry talking to him about Night Shift, he says, I shot all these Super 8 home movies on set, and I never actually developed them. Would you be interested in these movies for the documentary? And we're like, yeah, Henry, we sure would. And so the deal was we would get them developed and use them and then give back to him. So he actually had them finally after 41 years. And one of the joys of the comedy episode is to have all this unseen footage from behind the scenes of Night Shift. I felt like Indiana Jones. I felt like a pop culture archaeologist. This was our Ark of the Covenant.
Henry Winkler is so down to earth. I remember during the lockdown, I was blessed with the opportunity to talk with him, and he was teaching his kids in his backyard, and we were just sitting there having a conversation. He's just so giving to everybody who has ever supported him.
Oh, he's so warm and so fantastic, and it's so great to see the success he's had now with Barry and the Emmy nominations and all that. It's funny because Ron Howard, there are probably not two nicer people in Hollywood than Ron Howard and Henry Winkler, and for them to find each other and have this incredible friendship, professional and personal, is really remarkable. I just wish everyone in Hollywood was like Henry Winkler because he's so appreciative of his success. And he had success very early in his career, and it was, people forget, Happy Days was huge, was a huge show, and he was a huge star, and he never let it go to his head, and that's great.
We can't forget about talking about Fast Times at Ridgemont High. To me, this was a life-changing movie because we had never seen anything like it, and that soundtrack not only brought people to the theater, but that swimming suit scene, I can still see that bikini.
Yeah, well, I worked in a video store around then. I was in high school, and I'll never forget everybody who would bring back the tape. It was all, it was when they didn't rewind it. It was always at that scene,
yes.
stopped at that scene, and there's a joke that on tape, it would start to disintegrate because people would just watch that scene with Phoebe over and over and over again. But, it's funny because, of course, we all remember that scene and it's amazing. But that film has so much more depth than the average teensploitation movie. You combine Cameron Crowe, who went back and relived high school and wrote this incredible Rolling Stone article about his experience going back to high school, and Amy Heckerling's sort of nuanced direction. And it's been called the Citizen Kane of teensploitation, but calling it teensploitation really does it a disservice because it's not Porky's, it's not Zapped. It's a movie that has a lot on its mind that even today, I think, is relevant for, teenagers who are grappling with all these kind of difficult issues of growing up and going from being an adolescent to an adult, and it's just damn funny. Sean Penn is Spicoli.
Oh my god!
How great is that? And yet it has so much heart.
Oh my God! Nothing like this will ever happen again, right? Because the way that streaming has taken over, we've all become binge watchers. I want people to go back into theaters so desperately because there's nothing like seeing that big screen come to life.
You and me both. Unfortunately, it's like the streamers, they treat it and they call it all content. And for me, this is when film ceases to be art and it just becomes content. It's just widgets. And back in '82, these movies were all special.
Yes.
They were special to us. They were, and that's why we remember them and then why they stand the test of time. And you could go to a theater and wait online, because there were no reserve seating. There was no buying tickets in advance. You could wait online for hours, before getting into the movie you want to see. Plus, there were a lot less multiplexes, and going to the movies was an incredible experience in itself, which I think is something we opened the docuseries with in our first episode, which repeats tonight on the CW. And I think it's really it's an elegy for a lost era. It sort of makes me sad because people today don't have that experience of cherishing the movies and going to the movies and it being something special. They get dinner brought to their reclining seats. It's not the same.
I think Michael said that I have to cut out at 9:30. Is that true, Michael?
9:39.
9:39. Good. We're not done yet. Thank God in heaven. I'm telling you.
No, we're not, Earl.
Far from it. This is a 20-minuter. Keep it rolling. I'm loving it.
Well, the one thing that's so special about this is that you make it so relatable to every age group. Because in reality, I'm 61, and to me, I thought, okay, this show is going to be about my age. No, you're giving this to every age because it's going to give them the opportunity to explore.
Totally. Look, that was the biggest challenge because we didn't want it to just become a nostalgia piece, like Remember When, right? Something that belongs on the AARP channel, right? But it was about showing a new generation what it was like for us and why it was so special and how things have changed and how popular culture could be less ephemeral and really stand the test of time than it is now. But at the same time, for people like us, and that's what's so gratifying. The reviews have been, I think, some of the best reviews I've gotten for anything I've done in my career. And then also the reaction has been so positive. Because for people our age who remember what it was like, there is that sense of, oh my God, this captures that time so well. And then for younger audiences, I think they're really captivated and amazed by what it was like. And also, one of the great joys for me is people seeing films in this documentary that they're not familiar with and saying, oh my God, I got to go see Diner. I got to go see My Favorite Year, or I got to see Fast Times. That to me is probably the true triumph. But I mean, Night Shift is another great example. I mean, I think that's a movie that we really do justice to, that, a lot of people may not know. And then finding new layers to the things we do. I mean, one of my favorite segments is Conan the Barbarian, where we have the original tapes for Orson Welles recording the commercials and just not wanting to be there and making fun of the whole thing. And it's just, it's great. So whenever we can find something, come at it through a new perspective. Even Star Trek II, which is one of the most well-documented movies of all time, I think we unearthed some incredible information and stories about that movie that people have never heard before, which is hard when it comes to Star Trek. I mean, it's something I've covered in depth in the past as well in my books, 50-Year Mission, but we really, I think, unearthed some new information.
What listeners don't understand is that this time period, 1982, and with all these movies, they don't understand that because of these movies, AM radio was given another year to breathe. I mean, the industry was dying very quickly as a music format, and we needed movie soundtracks like this to keep us above water.
Yeah, and look at all the great movie soundtracks. You said it yourself, Night Shift, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, the songs we talked, Rocky III, Officer and Gentleman. But a lot of these movies had these incredible soundtracks. And then, also movie scores. You had Jerry Goldsmith doing things like Poltergeist, and John Williams' magnificent score for E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial. And, Basil Polidorus' score for Conan. So it was a great year for song soundtracks. It was also a great year for scores. It's just on every level, it's a remarkable year, because we don't get into it as much to the television shows, but it was the year Cheers premiered, and Family Ties, and Knight Rider, and T.J. Hooker, and Police Squad. It's just crazy. And then in music, it was an amazing year. Even in books, you had stuff like The Color Purple and Schindler's List, and a book that was very much a product of its time, which was super popular. People don't remember now. Real Men Don't Eat Quiche by Bruce Fierstein.
Oh my God!
But everybody at the time was like reading or talking about that book. And we have Bruce in the documentary, and we don't really get into that book as much, but who could forget it? I mean, I remember that was a huge phenomenon that year.
I got to be honest with you. I did not see E.T. in theaters. I waited until it came out on my beta tape, and so I'm totally missed it on the big screen.
Well, it's funny you say that, Arrow, because this was the era where you didn't go opening weekend necessarily.
Right.
I didn't see E.T., and then I sort of didn't see it for many months, but movies would stay in theaters for like a year back then. So I think it was finally like 5 or 6 months into its run where everyone kept telling me how great it was. And I'm like, okay, fine, I'll go see it, and begrudgingly, because it wasn't cool. I was in high school. It's like, oh, E.T., but these little kids. And then, of course, I loved it like everyone else. But, something like Star Trek II, I went opening weekend, but, I was not going to E.T. the opening weekend. And then, it was tough because you had the Sophie's Choice, and Sophie's Choice was another movie that opened that year. But, when Blade Runner opened against The Thing and Megaforce, it was like, what do you see? Or Poltergeist opens against Star Trek II. It's like, what do you see? I mean, it wasn't just like one. It's like people now are talking about Oppenheimer and Barbie opening on the same day. Like, oh, this has never happened. It's like, what do you mean it's never happened? It's like Star Trek II and Poltergeist, and Blade Runner and The Thing. And it's like, it's happened. It's happened many times.
I can't imagine Margot Robbie, what she's going through, because every photo I'm seeing right now, she is dressed up like a Barbie doll. She is pushing that because she knows she's got some serious competition in front of her right now.
Totally. And it's getting great reviews, and I'm excited about it. But I mean, you look at the films of this year and you compare it to something like 82. That's what's great about, in the documentary, Leonard Maltin, it was his first year on Entertainment Tonight. He says, we didn't know how good we had it. And he looks back, sort of, as an elegy for a lost age, and saying, my gosh, I mean, 1982, so many amazing films back then. And, one of the things we talk about ultimately is, all these incredible films, what wins the Oscar that year? You have any idea what won the Best Picture that year?
No.
It was Gandhi, a movie that no one remembers, no one talks about.
Wow.
You have all these classic movies that have stood the test of time, everything from 48 Hours to Fast Times to Blade Runner to Star Trek 2, just incredible films, up and down, Tootsie, Diner, Officer and Gentleman, all these great movies. And what's the film that wins? It's Gandhi. So, but that's the kind of film that the Academy recognizes.
Well, I got to tell you, I was never a Star Trek fan until The Wrath of Khan. That was my Beatles moment. That changed everything for me.
Yeah, a lot of people, I've heard that from a lot of people. A lot of people discovered it with Wrath of Khan. That was the film that made them a Trekker, or made them aware of Star Trek, that they hadn't watched the original series, maybe didn't see motion picture, but when they saw Star Trek 2, that was the thing that got them excited about Star Trek. And it's a really great film. Nick Meyer did a remarkable job. It's extraordinary that movie even came together. And what a great year for Shatner, because not only does Shatner have Star Trek 2, he also has Airplane 2, which he talks about in the documentary, which I've never seen him talk about. So it was great to have him talking about Airplane 2 because he's the only good thing in it. So it's great to have Bill talk about Airplane 2. He also does T.J. Hooker. It's the series premiere of T.J. Hooker that year. And he's the captain of the ABC team on Battle of the Network Stars. It truly is the year of Shatner. If we hadn't called it Greatest Geek Year Ever, we could have called it Greatest Shatner Year Ever.
Don't you love his confidence? I mean, that, if he ever changes, I want him the way he is. I love that about him.
If he hasn't changed at 93 years old, he never is. And I'm so grateful to Bill for doing the documentary, and he is wonderful in it, has great stories. I wish we could have used even more. He talks about how at the time he was making Star Trek 2, the director, Nick Meyer, was dating his daughter. And so he did not like that at all. And he just has such great stories. And there was another movie he did that year called Visiting Hours, this Canadian horror movie, and we want to talk to him about that as well. And remember, we said, so what can you tell us about your experience shooting Visiting Hours? And he's like, what's that?
Oh,
we're like, no, this horror movie you did. He's like, I have no idea. I don't even remember doing that. So there's not a lot of Visiting Hours in the docuseries, but there's plenty of other horror films. It was great to give Halloween 3 its due, a movie that's gotten unjustly savaged. Obviously, Poltergeist is a big part of the first episode. Creepshow, Cat People, even Swamp Thing is we give a little love, because it's amazing, now when superhero movies are ubiquitous and you have these huge blockbusters, some of the biggest movies of all time, after Superman, the next big superhero movie is not Batman in '89. The next big superhero movie is Swamp Thing, which is just not a good movie. And it's a little indie movie, made for like next to no money. And it's incredible. And again, a movie that's largely forgotten except by the real diehards. So it was great to have Adrienne Barbeau come on and talk about her experience doing Swamp Thing, which he looks at as sort of a Beauty and the Beast story, which it is. And she's the best thing about it, obviously.
Wow. Marc, you got to come back to the show anytime in the future. I love talking movies. Movies are my life. I work for a movie promotion company, so I have to know these movies, and you just took me down memory lane like you wouldn't believe, and I never saw one frame move. It was all in the conversation.
Oh, well, Arrow, thank you so much. I appreciate, we're so happy. I'm so proud of this Greatest Geek Year Ever 1982, this docuseries that's airing on the CW. It is truly a labor of love. I had the idea during the pandemic. We've been lucky to get so many people, both, on camera, and then this whole conversation that started in the wake of it airing, just talking about people's love for film. And that to me is the biggest tribute, the highest ratings we can get are people like you who are just, saying it rekindles their love of movies and why moviegoing is so special.
Yep. You be brilliant today. Okay, sir?
Okay. Thanks, man. Take care.